Some of the greatest hip-hop beats of all time share one thing in common: sampling Indian music. These samples have helped some of the most legendary producers make some of their greatest beats of all time. So today let's talk about what these amazing beats are, how they were made, as well as the stories behind these huge tracks. Now the first beat comes from a producer who's probably loved sampling Indian music more than anyone else, Timberland. And the preeminent track of him using an Indian sample is Get Your Freak On.
People sing around, now people gather round, now people jump around, get your freak on.
And the story behind this beat is pretty cool. Missy Elliott asked Timberland for one last beat for her album, and he started going through the different samples of his on his ASR 10. As he was doing this, Missy Elliott suddenly hears this sample here. And Missy loves this loop, but Timberland nearly messes things up and ruins everything.
I'm like, yo, that was it. And he was like, what? Because now he going so fast up and down the keyboard, he can't find it no more. So now he even more mad. Because I'm like, yo, I'm telling you, I know what I heard. So he finally hits it again. And I'm like, that. And I'm like, that joint is crazy. So when I rapped on it, it was only that sound and a kick.
So based on Missy's telling of this story, this is likely how the beat initially started off, with this loop here playing, as well as this kick pattern. Now you can hear this sounds different than the final beat. One of the biggest differences is the actual sample. What Timberland does is he maps the sample across the keyboard, allowing him to play it at different pitches like so. From here, this drum pattern is built out more, bass is added, as well as this percussion loop that also comes from the same sample library. Just a great beat here. The next Indian sample was used by both Kanye West as well as Madlib. You can decide which of these producers flipped this Indian sample better. First off, here is the sample that they both used. So Kanye used this to make the beat for Nas's Bonjour.
I should be more mature, sure, I'm spoiled. Hit up the south of France after tour.
And his approach to use this sample isn't all that complicated. For the most part, he just adds his own kicks underneath the sample, and initially this part of the sample gets used and looped. And then from there, this huge piece of the sample gets looped, and then we go back and forth between that intro that I just showed you, as well as this huge piece of the sample here. Nothing too overly complicated here. Now Madlib's beat that uses the same sample is Education by Freddie Gibbs.
Beast preparatory school, emperors and conquerors, pharaohs and followers, goblins and monsters.
And as you can hear, he uses the same part of the sample, but slightly differently. The beat is at the same pitch, albeit faster, and he adds his own drums in, but he mainly loops just this one section of the sample. And he also does use other parts of the sample, the same ones that Kanye uses, but more so just for switch-ups. But what's interesting about this is that over the years, Madlib had actually sent Kanye a lot of his beats, including many of the ones that Freddie Gibbs eventually used for his album.
Kendrick were rapping over a bunch of stuff, but they didn't really put the stuff out. That's the only one they put out.
Who specifically, was it Ye who specifically reached out to you or someone else?
Yeah, it was Ye. We went to the studio with him and trying to make me bring drum machines in and stuff. I was like, nah, I'm not doing it. I was bringing the beats.
So it's hard to know whether this was one of the beats that Madlib sent Kanye and Kanye chose to repurpose the sample for his own beat, but it's interesting nonetheless. You can let me know which of these two beats do you prefer. Let me know down in the comments. But we can move on to the next beat, which might be my favorite of all time that uses an Indian sample. It was made by Profile. The beat was used for Mobb Deep. The song I'm talking about is Give It To Me.
Give it to me, baby. Give it to me, play games. Give it to me, baby. The weight in the job.
And here is the sample that was used. Now, the way the sample is used is surprisingly complex. Profile uses this sample at multiple different pitches to create multiple layers for his beat. Now, first, the sample is pitched down 7.5 semitones and played at half the speed of the beat for this first percussive layer here. And as this loop is playing, a second layer is pitched up 4.5 semitones and it plays at normal speed. This gets added on top of what we already have at this point. And then from here, a third layer is used at the same pitch as the first layer. It's those great sounding plucked strings here. From here, the drums and bass get added in, and we have the core loop to give it to me. Now, there is still one more famous example of an Indian sample being used, which actually led to the producer of the beat getting sued. But before we get to that, how about I try to make a beat using an Indian sample? What good fun that would be, right? First, I'll go into YouTube and search up Indian samples. And I'll grab this one here. The guitars from this sample sound extra juicy, so I'll start off by building a loop using them. Next, I'll create a simple bass pattern using an 808. But this does sound a bit thin. I think a layer between these two sounds is needed. And from here, I'll make a bit of an unusual drum pattern. Instead of the usual hi-hat on every half or quarter beat, I'll create a more unique rhythm. And for the snare pattern, I'll do something different as well. Instead of the usual snare on the 2 and the 4, I'll create a ghost snare and keep the loop sounding a little bit more open and empty. What good fun that was. Now for the final beat, the one that actually led to the producer being sued. This is something that I actually covered in a video next to me, one where I talked about the biggest lawsuits having to deal with samples in hip hop. And one of these beats actually used an Indian sample. To hear the full story though, click the video next to me. If you enjoyed this video though, hit like and subscribe, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed this one. Bye for now.